Hi, so I have some practical tips that I wish I would have known before I got into medical school. I'm putting this out there because I just hope maybe one thing sticks and can help make your process a little easier. So, and again, as I always say, things are very specific to you. So I'm not saying these things because I think it's the cure. At the end of the day, you still have to figure out who you are and how you work. But that doesn't mean we don't learn and we don't get advice and we can't skip maybe a few hardships down the line. So, first and foremost, I wish somebody would have told me that if you get up early in the day, if you train yourself to be an early morning riser and an early sleeper, your day can be very productive. So my first and second years, and again, this is where things may not always look the same for you. We didn't have to go into class. And so my day was, for the most part, pretty much structured however I wanted it to be, which led to about 2 years of very non-intentional mornings, because I would end up studying really late and waking up late because there was no pressure to wake up early. And so my day was really jam-packed with studying. And I would some days literally wake up and grab my computer, especially on weeks it was before a final exam. And it was so unhealthy. And this was still in the phase, if you've been watching my videos, where I was studying very inefficiently. So my mornings were intentional, which led to the rest of my day not being very intentional, which led to going to sleep very late and the cycle continuing over and over. Then this led into having no life outside of studying. I had no hobbies anymore. There's really nobody else going to keep you accountable, especially if majority of your friends in that moment are people who are in medical school. So honestly, I wish I would have been waking up at 4:30 or 5 every morning, because I get lazy in my day. And so when I would study first thing in the morning, when I had maybe an hour or two before I would go to sleep, because I was just so exhausted from studying all day, the last thing I wanted to do was do something active, especially before I was going to sleep. Whereas in the morning, you've got your whole day in front of you to get what you need to done. And your action is, I have to get up. Whereas when things are winding down at night, your action is, I need to wind down and go to sleep. So you're just more in a mindset of more likelihood that you're going to do something productive, whatever that may be that interests you. And that could be working out, could be going on a hike, it could be doing any hobby that you like to do, painting, reading. And this is coming from someone who is not a morning person at all. I've never been a morning person. But I've gotten to a place right now and it's taken a lot of work, and it's going to continue to take a lot of work. But I've gotten to a place where I can get up at 5:30 and not feel exhausted and utilize the morning. And I can't tell you how that has changed my whole entire day. So it's not just rolling out of bed, and it's not just going through the motions and just getting by. There's an actual intentional actions from the very beginning of when you get up, and that really sets the whole day so much better. Choose your friends wisely. It's hard to make new relationships later in the year. For me personally, again, not always the case, but it's harder because life starts to get harder. And so your complacency is more easily going to set in. And for me, the first thing on my mind wasn't, okay, let me go find great friendships. My first thought was like, okay, I just need to study and get things done. So you're less likely to go get the kind of relationships you need in your life, and more likely to stay in the ones that you're at, but may not necessarily be good. And medical school brings out a side of you and other people that is not always the best. And if you can find people, for me, number one characteristic, I really need to be around people who are positive. In medical school, it is super easy to commiserate. It's a form of therapy almost, when you talk about how hard it is, how studying is so exhausting, and how your teachers are so ridiculous, and how your school is so ridiculous. And it's so easy to get in that cycle because it relieves stress for a second. And I have been very bad at this. I have been caught up in the whirlwind of having so many conversations over and over about the same thing, about how life is so difficult, how it's so hard, and all these things. And not that there isn't value in sharing a burden, but if you're not around people where you know your goals at the end of the day are to uplift, you're going to find yourself in a cycle of just constant negativity. And it really hurts how you carry yourself and your perspective of life, because there's no balance. It's only about how bad it is. I was really worried going into school because they said it was almost impossible that you could study by yourself. I did not agree with that. And I was really terrified because they were constantly saying the first week in orientation that the only way you're going to survive is if you have a good study group. I have never been that way. I have never studied in a group. I just don't work well in that environment. I shut down when I hear information that I don't know. I do this on tests as well. If I have to, on exams, I have to skip questions until I find one that I know for sure, because if I try to answer a question right in the beginning where I don't know it, I shut down and the rest of the test is just a mess. So it's just how I am. So when you're in a study group and things might be thrown at you that you haven't studied or you're not good at, I just would crawl into a shell and kind of give up mentally. And that's not always the case. And I'm guessing if that's not the case for you, you've probably already been studying with groups, and so this shouldn't be an issue for you. But I shut down, and instead of it being like, oh, I'm gonna get a refresher and I'm gonna listen to how other people learn and maybe it'll stick better, it's the complete opposite. I just don't do it. And I hate any kind of competitiveness. If I sense anything where you're trying to show that you know more, or you're trying to show that I don't know anything, I'm like, I don't want to be in that environment. So I think I studied in a group one time throughout medical school. Yeah. It is doable to do by yourself. However, if you do that, you are more likely not to have as easy of a group of friends. So you're going to have to, if relationships and friendships, which I agree are important, and if you want those, you're going to have to go out of your comfort zone and do other things and set up things with people. Because more often than not, people get into study groups and that becomes their friends. Okay. Your life does not have to end. It really does not. When I think back, it's crazy how much time was spent doing things because other people were doing that. One example is the study resource, Anki. So we had this epidemic in our class where people had to do Anki because other people were doing Anki. So, and then it was a constant conversation of how many cards did you do in a day? And I did this many cards and I have to get through 1,000 cards in a week, and what are you doing? And just, so like we would have people Ankiing in lecture. Like I would sit in the back and you could just see everybody was not even paying attention. They're just like flipping through their cards because they have this pressure of like, I have to get through these cards because everybody else is doing it. And I thankfully didn't do it with Anki. I purposely refused to do Anki just because of that fact, but I did do it with other things. So I started doing board questions earlier than I needed to, I would say. I could have been doing hobbies, I could have been exercising, I could have been taking time to take care of myself in those moments where I decided to do board studying after getting my class material done. And yeah, so other examples, I know a lot of people jumped into doing clubs, and clubs are great. I mean, it gets you out and it gets you exposed to other people and gets you outside of academics, which is very important. However, a lot of people jumped into a lot of clubs and a lot of leadership roles because other people were doing it, because our school was pushing it. And then those clubs ended up not really doing anything productive. They were just kind of associations that you could attach your name to so your resume looked better. And again, so many other things that you could be doing in your day. Yeah, so my point is, try and take yourself out of the bubble that is medical school. And it's really hard. It's really hard to do because it's a constant comparison. But try and get out of the whirlwind and see the world from a bigger perspective. And I think having relationships outside of school help with that, because you see other people doing normal jobs and you see other people with really difficult struggles. Not that medical school isn't a struggle, but like people getting sick, people not able to pay their bills. Having those conversations put things in perspective to get you out of this like cycle of life that is studying and trying to measure up. And so I would say your life doesn't have to end if you can figure out early how to not get sucked into that, because it will leave open so many gaps in your day or your week or your month where you can fill it with other things that you enjoy doing. Yeah. I started gardening. I started getting into cooking, baking my own bread, fermenting food. I have gotten into exercise and running. I want to do some marathons once I get strong enough. And the new thing is horseback riding. I needed those 2 years to figure out what is important to me. But that is not always the case. I mean, there's a lot of times where if you do something, a bad habit, long enough, it just becomes a part of your life, to where you get desensitized and numb to it actually being a bad habit. And that's terrifying to me. So the whole point of this is not to try and take away the experience that you need to go to figure out things on your own. You're going to have to do that no matter what self-help book or what self-help video you listen to. At the end of the day, you're going to have to figure it out. But what's great about that is all of the mistakes, all of the hardships, all of the low seasons can lead to something great and healthy and good. And so don't be scared to make mistakes, and don't be scared that you're going to get it wrong. I would just say I gave you some tidbits that maybe planted some seeds and will help you in some way, but just keep an open hand and an open mind. The same thing that I said in my studying video, be adaptable and broaden your perspective. Try not to get trapped into a cycle, because it will cloud your vision and your judgment, and the mistakes are not the problem. The mistakes happen and they're necessary, but it's the getting totally blinded to the fact where now you don't even realize what you're doing isn't healthy. And I think as human beings, we never know what our threshold is where we're going to be blinded to that extent. So always be pushing and working on not getting there. And as I said, having friendships outside of school, picking your friends well, knowing and trying to understand yourself and how you work, doing an honest assessment. Thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Go do something fun if you have a moment to spare.